trillions are numbers that are so big it's hard to imagine. We usually associate them with space travel. And the reason that we don't use trillions in space is because it's too big to use light years. A light year, by the way, is 5.6 trillion miles. The federal budget deficit is bigger than the entire economy of the United States. The annual deficit is bigger than the entire gross state product of the state of Texas. When we, if you could spend $1 million every day since Christ was born, you would still have another 700 years to go before you spent your first trillion. After the last election, Congress of the United States, along with the President, got together and had a great, allegedly bipartisan victory over taxes and over spending. The only problem with it is it added $850 billion to this $14 trillion deficit. Article 5 of the United States Constitution gives us here in Texas an opportunity to change that. And one of the things that we need to debate and discuss and pass in this body as soon as possible is a resolution calling on the Congress under Article 5 of the United States Constitution to call a constitutional convention for the purposes of balancing the federal budget. Texas has done this before. Texas did this back in 1978 and 79. It was ignored. It was forgotten. We dare not let it happen again. A lot of the talk on my nominated speech was about our budget. Would like to share with you a couple of numbers that haven't been widely discussed because there's a blizzard of numbers and a blizzard of opinions and a blizzard of this and that. The comptroller said that the total state revenue in the next biennium is $177.8 billion. That's everything. General revenue, federal funds, other funds, whole thing, $177.8 billion. 2 years ago, her revenue estimate was $167.7 billion. $10 billion less than now. And my point is this, that a lot can happen in the next 140 days, and our job in this Texas Senate is to manage the problem and not let the problem manage us. And I know with $177.8 billion and $9.2 billion in the rainy day fund, we can get the job done. It will not be easy, it will not be painless, but we can do it. One of the areas that we have got to address is Medicaid. How we deal with Medicaid will determine how the rest of the budget goes. In the current biennium, we appropriated $44 billion of all funds to Medicaid. And as a result of the federal stimulus that was enacted 2 years ago, the federal government reimbursed Texas out of that $44 billion. 70% was paid for with federal tax receipts, and 30% was paid for with our tax receipts. We believe that there will no longer be such a stimulus. We believe that the federal government cannot do it and be fiscally responsible. And so we are anticipating a federal match that's more like 58-32, 58-42. The difference between a 60-40 match and a 70-30 match, just to round off the numbers, is $4.5 billion, 10% of $44 billion. And that $4.5 billion that's not coming from the federal government has got to be replaced with something. Some of it has to be reformed. Medicaid cries out for reform. Every hospital in this state and every procedure in every hospital in this state has a different formula for reimbursement. It makes no sense. It has been estimated by our Lieutenant Governor and others that if we converted Medicaid to a managed care program, we could save $4 billion. Over 30 governors of the state of Texas have petitioned the federal government for relief. A system that only sends you 60% of the money but ties you up with 100% of the regulations will not work. And so our first job, Senators, is to figure out how to save Medicaid. We have got to reform it, and we have got to work together to fill, as a minimum, the $4.5 billion hole that exists because we are not going to receive any more federal stimulus money. If you look at our budget with respect to education and health and human services, Article 2 and Article 3, 81% of all the general revenue that we appropriate is appropriated in Article 3 and Article 2. It is impossible to balance this budget without making cuts in Article 2 and Article 3. Article 3, in Article 3, which is the entire education budget, we appropriate approximately $50 billion. If you look at the foundation school program, we appropriate about $35 billion of that $50 billion. The foundation school program has serious structural problems. And in order to balance this budget, we are going to have to fix public school finance. And the biggest problem with public school finance is a term called target revenue. If you go back and you remember what we did in 2006 and 2007, we basically held all of our school districts harmless. And what we said in 2006 was, look, school districts, we know that by cutting school property taxes, some of you guys are not going to get as much money as you used to, so we promise that you'll always get the same amount of money forever. School districts get to pick between how much money they got in 2005 or how much money they got in 2006, and we promise to keep giving them the same amount of money no matter what, per student. So the money keeps going up because the population's going up. We have to fix target revenue in order to balance this budget. Target revenue is a form of hold harmless. I asked the LBB how much hold harmless is costing us in the foundation school program, and the answer is $5.5 billion. So there's where your hole is. $4.5 billion in Medicaid and $5.5 billion in the foundation school program. We have got to fix that. We can. And the last thing I want to talk to you about with respect to the budget is the state's business tax, what's called the gross margins receipts tax. We enacted that, again, back in 2006 as part of the largest property tax cut in the history of this state. And we did. We cut school property taxes by $14 billion. And we were going to pay for that in part with a new business tax called gross receipts, the margins tax. Problem is that the margin tax has underperformed what we have predicted ever since we enacted it. In fact, it's underperformed it by a huge amount. On average, year after year after year, starting in 2006, the margins tax has underperformed what we predicted when we enacted all these property tax cuts by approximately $2 billion a year.